Hello and welcome to another episode of Thank You for Spieling, a new podcast that you can share with your mom as long as your mom is one of the cool moms. It's been great so far on this show to get to chat with such a variety of guests so far. And this week, we're breaking a brand new to this show record in terms of number of guests. My guests this week have a podcast with nearly 50 episodes in the can, and they're combining two really cool things you can do on the couch, watching movies and talking to your therapist. Please welcome the hosts of Popcorn Psychology Podcast, Ben Stover, Hannah Espinoza, and Brittany Brownfield. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. You guys, I managed to see live at the Blue Box Cafe in Elgin 100 years ago, it feels like.
Oh,
It sure does.
It really does.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Pre-COVID times for one of the Southgate Media marathons. So that was super cool. And I also met Ben at a house party a couple years, I think, even before that.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
I think your daughter was either she'd just been born.
You met me before that. Because you know Matt and
Yeah.
Sarah, and Matt and Sarah had us at your place in Lincoln Square before.
Oh, God. Oh, my God. That's 12 years ago now.
Yeah, at least.
Wow, that's 2008. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, yeah, I feel, well, I've known you forever now. I've known you for as long as I've been in Chicago, because that was that first year. So, anyway, welcome. You guys, so I love your podcast.
Oh, thanks.
And that is part of the reason I had to have you guys as guests on my show, because I want to introduce, for listener crossover, and also because I really believe in it. And I've done a few episodes now where I've talked about this coronavirus that's going around and
Sweeping the nation.
the COVID sensation that's sweeping the nation, and continues to do so. But the appeal here is you guys are all licensed psychotherapists. And so it was a wonderful opportunity. And you bring that to the podcasting forum. So I have many questions for you, but I've already talked too much at the top. So please tell the audience a little bit more about yourselves, what you do, how you got started, all of that.
I'm Brittany. So we are all three licensed clinical professional counselors, which is what you'd call a therapist, pretty much. That's the wordy way to put it. And we've been doing popcorn psychology for a little over 2 years now, like 2.5, I think now. And we all met working together. We all met on the job.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And actually, Brittany introduced me to Ben, and then we all worked together.
We've worked together in multiple
Jobs.
places. Yeah.
You're right. Yep. I met Brittany on my first day working at Thresholds.
Oh, yeah, we met at orientation together. It
That's
was
right.
like, two twin flames meeting.
That's right.
Aw.
And I already had been headhunted by the place he worked at serendipitously.
It is serendipitous.
Yeah.
I was the supervisor of the site then, and they didn't tell me, like, oh, yeah, we're hiring somebody new. And then I met Brittany, and I was talking about this place. Like, oh, you should definitely look into this place. Like, yeah, they're headhunting me already. Like, huh?
It was very weird, and it was very coincidental.
It was. But it seems to have worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and then Hannah and I met at our separate job, and we literally like 4 days into knowing each other, we went out for work drinks and stayed out till 3 a.m., just the two of us being bonkers, and we've been like best friends ever since.
Yeah, that is 100% accurate.
Yeah.
I just want you two to know that right now in my head, I am seeing Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly going, did we just become best friends?
I'm sure the energy was very similar.
Oh yeah. I was act like a straight up
You like
maniac.
that? I like that. And we're like, well, damn. And then
I
we
was
got
like-
hot dogs at the Chicago place on Clark at like 3 a.m., and that was that.
And then I told her that I really liked her, and then I ran away to catch the bus. Totally normal.
That's a perfect.
I literally ran away.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I was
that's-
worried I was going to miss the bus.
Why do I not know this story?
Yeah. I've watched her run to multiple buses.
Yeah, she
Does
don't
it
know
always
why.
come after like an awkward like second grade? Okay, I like you, bye.
It's because the fucking Clark bus just comes whenever it wants.
Are you guys talking like at Wiener Circle? Is that where you went?
Yeah. No, not
No.
Wiener Circle.
It's just south of Belmont, that one
Clark's
right there.
Wieners.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Clark dogs.
Clark Wieners is definitely not right.
Wieners and stuff. Yeah. And so we started the podcast because we all had known each other for a bit. and we all had seen The Last Jedi and were like obsessed with it and could not believe that people didn't feel the way we felt about The Last Jedi.
Oh.
And Ben is like an uber Star Wars fan. Uber. And so he
Like
came up
he's,
true.
he's in the league.
of extraordinary
has-
Star Wars.
Exactly.
And-
There's like a costume.
Yeah.
Several.
And so
It's awesome.
he brought up to us, like, do we do a podcast where we kind of talk about the psychological nuance that's in Last Jedi that made us love it so much that might be being missed or misunderstood by, like, the mainstream.
Right.
It was a shower idea. It was literally a shower idea. Like, we had just talked about it, like, in the office, and I went home and was like, oh my God, we have to do this. We have to. And then I brought it to Hannah and Brittany, and they're like, yes, duh. We had this, like moment of, like, mind meld, and then it was born.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you guys have done close to 50 episodes. I love it. I've listened to Joker, Matilda, one of the Hunger Games ones. Some of my favorite episodes, like just the discussion that's had. And so you guys talk about a film. You talk about, sometimes you break it down by characters, other times by different plot. And there's always like sort of a diagnosis phase, which is like super, super cool. And you're talking about treatment of how certain characters would get help for their perceived conditions. So I think it's an amazing podcast. Definitely encourage all of our listeners to check it out. And it's wherever podcasts are found, I'm sure.
Well,
Everywhere.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
But so, two-part reason for having you guys on this show today. It's another coronavirus episode, folks. But it continues to perplex and amaze me that COVID cases are still rising in, this is, I guess, the beginning of August that we're recording. So a full 5 months after we first sort of news started to break, and the what to do about COVID as far as social distancing, a lot of that messaging has come out. So we've had, Chicago in particular, we're all in Chicago, and it has closed down and opened up. And, we've really gone through, I felt, a lot together as a community. And certainly a lot has happened in the last 5 months. But it seems that because the numbers are still on the rise, that perhaps it was all for naught. Perhaps all the effort. I can't help but feel a little defeated at times. And looking within myself and just looking at the news, like, there seems to be a lot of people who aren't taking the threat seriously. And I've asked my therapist this question, but he won't come on my podcast. So I want to ask you guys something about a conflict of interest. I don't really understand.
Ethically, he's correct.
Yeah.
Dual relationships. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
So
Yeah, I'm glad he says that because he's right.
yeah, no, I
Yes.
mean he's super great. But yeah, he could, but then he'd never be my therapist again. And I like him, I want to keep him. But no, but I really wanted to get all of your guys' thoughts, and because you have a podcast and I have a podcast, and it's super it makes sense to ask you, just in general, why do you think what is there just, so there's people that aren't wearing masks, there's people that are going to COVID parties, that keeps getting brought up on this podcast too. What is the underlying, I know we all just kind of want to, I think I speak for all of us when I say we just kind of want to sigh when we see that kind of thing.
I wish I had a really, really Stretch Armstrong long arm and could just slap the shit out of all of them.
Yeah.
So this is the diagnosis stage of what's
It's a new
wrong?
therapy. It's called slap therapy.
What's wrong with people? What's wrong with America? Why aren't people wearing masks?
I mean, okay. It's a very, I don't know if I want to say complicated idea. It's not that complicated. I mean, I guess my theory or opinion is that, I mean, first off, we're a very individualized nation. Like we're very much, it's just capitalism of like, you get out, you get your own, like you work your way up. Like we're very much more individual. Whereas from what I've noticed news-wise, and you can correct me if I'm misunderstanding, a lot of the countries that are doing well with coronavirus are a lot more collectivist societies where there's more of a value based on the common good, making choices for the common good versus the individual. So I think the first part of it psychologically in America is that we're just set up to be very individualistic and to be very, get yours and take care of yourself. And I think then a byproduct of that is that we're more inclined to be egocentric. And egocentric's not the same as selfish. Because selfish is more like you're intentionally doing things for your own regard, which it can be a component, but egocentric is more you don't really see outside of yourself, or you just have lack of awareness that what you're doing is based in your own ego and your own self. And so I think that's the first part of it is I think just seeing things from your own perspective. So I think when people go into stores and they're not wearing a mask, and then like the videos we're all seeing now where people start to freak out on them when they're being told they have to wear a mask, I think it's this, my assumption is it's this very base feeling of like, I only see how this impacts me. I can't see outside of it, or the fact that I'm even like the store clerk I'm yelling at, who's probably a teenager making minimum wage, that I'm putting them through this. And it's not even, they don't own this store. They didn't make this call. So now I'm terrorizing a person who is only doing a menial job they probably don't even give a shit about. And so I think that is a part of it, is just a very deep egocentrism about this. It's like, I can only see how it's impacting me. And because you're infringing on me, everyone can kind of go sort of fuck themselves. It's kind of the energy.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that is definitely plays a big part. I also have been thinking about it in terms of the idea that when something like a prolonged collective trauma happens, sometimes people have to find different ways to deal with that. And sometimes they have to make up a reality that they then have to stick to. Because if they don't stick to the reality that they've created for themselves, they can't deal with what's happening. So if the idea is, I'm not going to get it, or I can't get it, I don't have to wear a mask. Even though that's just not the case. Like, part of the reason why our country is such a fucking mess in terms of this is because we don't have someone who has any brains who is managing us as a whole. So it's also the fact that they have stepped back, leaned on the governors, and now all the governors, based on if they're Republican or Democrat, are making different decisions. And I think that also shows a lack of being united as well, and a lack of governors making those decisions also shows people that they don't have to care about other people either.
Yeah, so it's like gives them permission.
Absolutely. So I think I think in terms of the egocentric piece, that people, if they don't know someone, then it's not happening. And we keep going the way that we are, they will absolutely know someone.
Yeah.
They sure will.
There's no doubt about it. And I think the idea, and I think sometimes people cling so hard to their idea of rights and what they're allowed to do, and this has nothing to do with that. This is about protecting yourself, protecting other people, and it doesn't have anything to do with who you voted for president. And because the president is taking that role, I think that, again, gives people permission to act like maniacs. So, and we've already seen that through the time that he's been president already, that's a part of what is happening. All of the different, people just feel emboldened. People just feel like they're allowed to do things because they have a president who's horrible person.
Well, and he clearly doesn't care about them or public safety. That's the thing that gets me.
Yeah, I don't think he cares about anyone else. I think he very much is trying to keep control in any way that he can, and it doesn't matter if people die over it, and people are, and he's directly responsible. There is no confusion about that, based on the fact that other countries have locked down, worn masks, done what they had to do, didn't open up because the economy was bad, and they're already doing stuff. I have a brother who lives in Germany. They were locked down for 2 months. And they're okay. They don't have to wear masks. The kids are going back to school, and it's not like here. It's not like it's a threat or it's a worry, because here our numbers are still all over the place because nothing is consistent.
Right.
And even as soon as the rollbacks happened in Chicago, it was like as soon as it was announced that we weren't gonna have to be shelter in place anymore, half of the people outside stopped wearing masks.
Yes, I saw that too.
It was unbelievable. It was so odd. So I think what Brittany says is absolutely right. And I think and also I don't think people understand.
And I also think people are scared, though. I think it's a lot of fear. I think it's the part of us that like victim blames as well. Like when we talk about like sexual assault, and they'll be like, "Well, what were you wearing?" Because it's like we want to have like feigned control. Like if I can blame the victim, then I can continue to live in a world where because I'm making different choices, it's not going to happen to me. So I think this is also people are just denying stuff, like the truth of things. And it's like the same idea with like white fragility and racism. And like when people will say to me, well, I don't really think women have, nothing's happening to women anymore. Like that sexism isn't a thing or racism isn't a thing anymore. Because I think that it's just too upsetting and uncomfortable. I think it's too uncomfortable to recognize that these bad things are happening. And so my assumption is like Corona is similar in that it's too scary. So I have to actively pretend it's not happening, or I have to actively engage in confirmation bias. So that's like gathering information that denies science, that elevates conspiracies. And what's great about conspiracies is you can never prove them wrong, because then that's part of the conspiracy. So it's like the circle jerk of confirmation bias. And then my assumption is I mean, like it's the bubble too. Like I'm surrounding myself with people who believe in science, who believe in wearing masks, who understand what's going on.
Right.
And then I'm made aware of communities where that's the total opposite, and it blows my mind. And so I think it's also that part too. It's like the us and them, which is a big part of social psychology, like us grouping up, and that's something we've been
out-group. Yep.
Yeah, that's something we've done since the beginning of literal time. And so I think it's part of that, and I think it's also like I can't stomach how uncomfortable I am right now, so I have to actively deny it. And that's why like people will just not wear masks and stuff, because it's where no one's having a good time right now. You know?
It's a collective trauma.
Yeah. And so we're trying to actively deny that it's happening, because we want to go back to normalcy so fiercely that you will believe in like more like conspiracies, or that your rights are being infringed upon. Just you want to put your energy somewhere that makes you feel like you have control over a situation that's uncontrollable.
Even if that energy goes into denial and actually what could harm you and even those close to you. So Hannah, you said prolonged collective trauma is what you called it.
Yeah.
Ben, what is that really?
So collective trauma means is that we're all going through something awful together, and because it's ongoing, there's no known endpoint. It's not a single event trauma. Like what just happened in Beirut would be an example of a single event collective trauma. Right? Like the ongoing fallout from that and what's happening is going to be single event, but eventually they're going to be able to rebuild and contain and hopefully not have whatever caused that explosion happen again. Whereas what's going on across the world with coronavirus is something that's been going on for months and months. There is no known endpoint. There's no known cure. There's no known anything other than it's going to keep going. And if people don't listen, it's going to get worse, and all that we know is that people are dying, but we can't have any other control than that. So that creates an ongoing collective trauma because it's going on for a long time. We're all going through it together. We're all going through it in the same time frame, but in different ways.
So we're also talking psychologically, like emotionally, among people. Like we're suffering from trauma, so we aren't mentally well. Even in disregarding all other conditions we may have, the fact that we're in trauma now means our brains are probably doing things that they ordinarily wouldn't do, because there's this existential threat that's sort of brought home of coronavirus.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, correct. Because when we get into the state that everybody is in, so imagine like everybody has kind of a thermometer that they have a base level of what homeostasis is for them. Let's say, it's like 98.6 for everybody, right? That's your temperature. Everybody's running a fever right now. Everybody is running a fever right now of some degree. It may not be 103, it may not be 105, but everybody is running 100, like 99 to 100 base level. Let alone if you get sick, if you've lost your job, if something has happened to a family member, if somebody you know has died, somebody you know has gotten sick, it's affected you in some way, your finances have crashed, whatever has happened, each thing raises the temperature level.
And it doesn't go down.
until the trauma stops.
Right. So like everybody just has a fever all the time. And then the only thing that happens is it goes up.
And I'm assuming when this crisis is over, whatever that looks like, that the fever, it won't go down. And so there should be some mental health services provided that would help people get back to their sense of normal.
Yeah,
right?
like they're even talking about like in Wuhan where it started that like people, and I haven't read anything in a little bit, so I might be off base now, but like people developing agoraphobia, especially like older people being really scared to go outside. I think it's going to have, I hypothesize it's going to have a longer term impact about like in like social anxiety and anxiety. Like
Absolutely.
like the way I think about I like regard other people now like walking grenades. Like I like the covered in poison. Like I think the idea of like letting someone touch me, like their bare skin touch my bare skin, feels like very scary right now. We're like touching things outside, and I'm a therapist, and I have to actively remind myself the coronavirus isn't covering everything. You know what I mean? That we wear masks and stuff because we might just transmit it to each other. But it's like it's created this state of anxiety within me where I'm like everything's covered in it, and I have to be like, Brittany, no, it's not. We're being precautious, not like. We are being somewhat reactive, but we're also just, a lot of these things are precautions, so I don't have to act as if well, you're supposed to act as if, but like I have to remind myself of my own anxiety, like it's okay, like, but I can't imagine that stuff isn't going to like have a long-standing effect on people.
Oh, it's certainly going to.
They've already talked about, like 2 months ago, there were studies already done that's saying that this is going to affect mental health for decades.
I think that's a near certainty. Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
because what's happening is when we're in a trauma state, that we go into your prefrontal cortex goes into kind of a hijack state, which means that your ability to process information in the same way changes. Your ability to physically respond to things changes. You're like less resilient. You're more in a stressed out state, making you more susceptible to disease, which is fun.
Yeah. It's unfortunate.
Yep.
It is.
It's true because like you're running hot all the time. But when you get into this hijack state, you're not able to function in the same way. So that may be some of what explains why people are in this weird detached reality state, because if everybody's also in this state where everything is so stressed out and in heightened alert all the time, that basically imagine like your brain, the blood flow and the function in your brain, your forehead, and from your temporal area to your forehead is where your prefrontal cortex sits, right? And the more like the blood flows up there, the more logical thought you're doing. The more it retreats back to the brainstem area, the more lizard brain we get to, which means that we get into more of a react, defend, survive.
Yeah. That's why people are like throwing loaves of bread at people at grocery stores. It's because we're in that weird fight or flight mode about wearing a mask, because it's just touching that. It's like someone's poking that part of our brain.
Right.
And we're pumped full. Everybody's has more cortisol in their bodies and in their brains than we have had. And I feel like the amount of times that, like, I'm currently doing teletherapy from home, and the amount of times that I have to like gently remind people of all the things that are happening, not to make them freak out, but to remind them that it's okay, the way that they're feeling, to help them understand that, like, so just remember, you've been home with your kids, with your partner for 5 months without having any idea of what's going to happen in the next 5 months. Like, that continued level of uncertainty is part of what, and also I'm seeing right now, almost people are going back to struggling in the way that they were in March. So in March, every session I had was about COVID.
Me too.
Every single
day.
session was about COVID.
I wouldn't expect anything different. It's like if you're finding a meteor is going to come hit us, it's like, well, Doc, how do I process this information is the number one question.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I think we're finally in like, this is a marathon, not a sprint territory. Like I was talking to Hannah about that, because Hannah and I also live, besides being best friends, we live a block and a half from each other.
Aw.
So Hannah's the only person I've touched since March. Every once in a while, I think about that, and I go into a minor dissociative state in my house, and then I have to snap back into reality.
And sometimes I make Brittany give me longer
I'm
hugs.
trying really hard not to rap right now.
And
Keep it together, Ben.
And so we were like in the beginning doing all the typical stuff of like eating horrible fast food and just being a messes like the first like 2 months, and that very like, I'm going to get mine because everything else sucks. So on the weekends, I'm going to rage out and treat myself. And then at one point, I kind of looked at Hannah and I was like, we're in marathon territory now. We can't keep living like this. We have to start getting back into like exercising in some concept and not eating horrendously every weekend and, you know, taking care of ourselves better. And so I think,
Yeah, and
but I think the kind of what you're saying, might have been saying, Hannah, is like, but now we're getting into a fatigue state because of that.
Right, and
Yeah.
like look at like, cortisol is the stress hormone for those of us that don't know. Hannah is doing a fuck moment. Like, oh, I was supposed to say that. But cortisol and adrenaline are your stress and your survival hormones, and those are what jack you up. But when we're thinking about this, something to remember, as I saw this article in Psychology Today, and I've been relaying it to my clients every day, and I know Eric and I talked about it in the car on the way here, is that try to pull your head out of Pinterest and Instagram, where people are showing like all of the things that they're doing that are cool. Like, if that's putting you in a healthy state, giving you ideas, awesome. But if it's putting you in a guilt state or an
Yeah.
anxious state or a depressed state that you're not able to do those things, pull out of that, because the reality is that we're going through this trauma, and that your mission for this isn't to complete your lifelong dream. Your mission through this is to survive. And your brain and your body are putting you into survival mode. If you've looked around at yourself or everybody else outside and you've noticed that most of us have gained weight during this time,
How dare you, Ben? How dare you look at me?
I'm actually down a belt size, man.
Wow.
I'm not.
Also rude of you to point that out.
I'm joking. I'm actually joking. I think I'm up a size. Who knows? So yes, like you were saying.
Yeah, but like I was saying, but basically it's nearly impossible to lose weight when your cortisol is high.
Oh,
Wow, that really comforts me, actually.
See, all that energy you were coming at me, all that negativity.
thanks,
Yeah.
COVID.
Listen, I'm also in fight or flight mode.
Girl,
I'll throw a loaf of bread at you.
Yeah.
Well, I'll eat it because that's going to go. I mean, my body needs those carbs. That's the reality, though. Is when the cortisol is firing, it's extraordinarily difficult to lose weight. It is so hard to lose weight when you're stressed, because your body is going, we might need this really soon, because your brain doesn't differentiate between threats, whether they're emotional, physical, or biological. Your brain does not differentiate. All it knows is threat. That's it. So it's blinking red light going danger, 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 which means that fat stores, sugars, carbohydrates, all of that are good, because we turn that into energy, and we're not going to let that go. So fuck yourself is basically what your brain does.
Yeah.
But I think there's something else I wanted to add to it. Like Brittany and Hannah were talking about, the concept Hannah was talking about is basically, it's called cognitive dissonance. Was when you create this narrative for yourself, and you fundamentally reject anything else that disproves it.
It makes your brain like really uncomfortable. I almost, when I talk to clients about it, I'm like, it's like getting a really like intense static noise accompanied with like electric shock in your head.
Oh,
And so like, that's not really what you feel, but like that can be the strength of it
yeah.
psychologically.
Right. And it really exists to try to keep you out of that. Like, have you ever been in a situation where somebody told you a different perspective on something that just blew your mind wide open in a way you never considered?
Yeah.
And you get that feeling of like, what? That's it. Because what the dissonance does is it keeps you away from that, because that frequency vibrating with you is so uncomfortable that you just like, it can't be that. Like that's not even real. Like, that's why people get into this. Well, COVID's a hoax, and why they find comfort in seeking these theories, these conspiracy theories out, is because then they can feel like, well, I'm part of the in-group that actually knows what's going on, and because I know what's going on, I have some control restored to me in this. And the dissonance part is that the reality that they actually have no more fucking control than anybody else, regardless of what they think happens or what the Cheeto in chief told them, is that you have no control over this whatsoever. No one knows exactly what happens. The only things that you can do are to keep yourself and others around you as safe as possible. But part of doing that is by covering your mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they reject that because they can't accept that they have no control. And also tying into like what Brittany is saying, part of like the collectivistic versus individualistic culture is that this is part of why I see people not wearing masks. And I hear this is from people, clients, is that, well, wearing the masks, so surgical masks don't even protect me from anything. And like, what's the point of wearing it? If they don't protect you, what's the point? Like, that's not the point.
Yeah.
The point is that if you wear it and they wear it, then nobody's spit goes anywhere because it's you protecting them, not you protecting you. Because all the N95s and everything are all gone because now they're being rationed to places that actually need them, so general citizens don't have them. And I learned something even more fascinating about those recently, and from a nurse client that I have, that they're not only wearing the N95s, but they're wearing the surgical mask over them. And why they're doing that is because the N95s have the vent. So the breath in protects you, but then it still breathes out. So you wear the surgical mask over the N95 so that it prevents the breathing in and the breathing out.
Yeah, and I know that the conditions were pretty rough in certain hospitals about how long they were wearing an N95 mask for. It wasn't one per one patient. It was a lot worse.
Oh yeah, it was one for the day.
Especially as this was starting. So I want to. So definitely, what we've touched on that I want to get back to is the politicization of the science, of information, of the partisanship, all this stuff that's happening. But first, I want to tell a story because I was thinking about this trauma. So my dad tells the story of growing up. So he was born in 1957, and he remembers, as I'm sure many Americans do, the Cold War was happening. And in between those years, and really at all times, there were bomb drills, raid drills, air raid sirens, things like, go down to this shelter. And my dad just talks about, his early life being in constant fear of the bomb. Whoever sent it or whatever, being in constant fear of the bomb. And my dad, give his total medical history, but he has anxiety and depression and suffered a mental breakdown when he was younger than I am currently. And who the hell can blame him? And that was just a normal American life experience when he was that age. And I can't help but think like a lot of this stuff rings true in terms of maybe there's now a development issue because of that constant state of fear. And this is just a normal, 60 whatever year old guy now. Mm-hmm. So if everybody's messed up because everybody has trauma, then is there really any? Again, I always look right. These conversations always turn to: is there hope? Because I also So okay, so let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think might be different. I don't know. I'm going to make a wide assumption, which I think is true.
Yeah.
In your dad's time, how much was mental health even talked about? How vulnerable were people allowed to be? How much were you allowed to verbalize feeling fear and anxiety? I think what I hope's different now
and access to care.
Yes.
Right, because back,
because like 80s is when like counseling associations and stuff really started pumping up. So
right, and you either had money for psychotherapy, psychoanalysis. CBT would have been just starting in the 80s.
And what Ben's saying, cognitive behavior therapy, that's the kind of therapy that actually has like practical skills built in. Like this is a breathing technique you can do when you're scared. This is like a thought experiment technique you can do with yourself when you're having really intrusive thoughts. And so before that, there wasn't a lot of concrete, like these are actual practical things you can do when you're having these feelings. It was more like, lay down on the couch and tell me about your dreams. And did you have a lot of weird thoughts about your mom? And so it was more of like the Freudian kind of thing.
Right. And and the other thing is that, getting sent to the nut house was actually a thing then.
Yeah.
The state hospitals and like the type of care and what kind of medications were available and what they would give you it's a lot different than it is now.
And I think the fact that, a lot of people go to therapy. A lot of people know basic terms in mental health, like anxiety, depression, things like that. There's still a lot of obvious misunderstandings, a lot of stigma, which we talk about on our show a lot. But I think there's a different, I work almost exclusively with adolescents, and I think there is a big shift with awareness of mental health. I think it's a lot more part of the nomenclature and dialogue. I think sometimes almost swinging in the other direction where they're a little too therapized in their language and they kind of self-diagnose a little too much and think they know what they're talking about. And ironically, that could have its own barrier because I'm like, I need you to listen to me. But
not WebMD or TikTok.
Or
Please
like your friend, or the internet. And
don't just drink it away, please.
But I think there's also a lot more, like with how big Brene Brown is and stuff. There's a lot more discussion very recently in the last few years about vulnerability and being more open with your feelings. And so I think my hope is that everyone's kind of has more, while this is happening, there's a lot more understanding of what's actually happening while it's happening. And then a lot more access and normalization of getting help around what's happening and a lot more understanding. And so my hope is that all of that will lead to a better outcome than what you're speaking to, Eric, of like, you just grit your teeth, you get through it, and no one talks about it. And if you talk about it, you're not a real man or you're not strong or whatever.
Yeah.
Until you snap in half.
So, and that does give me hope. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of, I think my hope is that it will hopefully lead to some kind of regular mental health education at some fucking standard so that it doesn't feel like the amount of times that I'm explaining what feels like kind of like pretty like basic terms or feelings like about anxiety or about feeling overwhelmed and things that again, it's not their fault that they don't understand or haven't heard of it. But I think that the look on the faces of my clients when they realize that something isn't just because there's something wrong with them something that feels so, and to me feels so simple, right? Because I'm a therapist.
Yeah, right.
Right, we sit in this all day, every day.
Exactly. So it's, and it just, sometimes it just breaks my heart. It's like this person has been struggling for however long, 30, 40 years, because there isn't any mental health education. My hope is that because we will all be so affected by this, that there will be a push to open up access. Teletherapy will continue and has already opened up access for different people, even people that I'm seeing.
And I don't think that's going anywhere. I think that's a big gain.
And that's huge. Access to mental health care is one of the biggest problems. That's one of the biggest barriers for all different things. And access has a lot to do with insurance and has a lot to do with all of capitalistic trash. And so it's, so I think that that's a big part of it. And my hope, and I had definitely have to remind myself of this on a pretty consistent basis, is that this at the very least will have a push to help people understand even some basic mental health, even having basic strategies or whatever the case may be. That's what my hope is. And because more and more people are getting affected, I mean, I'm talking to clients who've never been in therapy before, but because in the last 2 or 3 months, they don't know what to do. And they haven't, I think that's another part of the reaction that we're getting is people who maybe haven't ever had this level of anxiety before, and they don't know what to do with it. And so I think we are getting into that denial of I have to deny what's happening because I don't. It's so scary and so uncomfortable.
Yep. And I think there's two flashbacks I've had to school in this conversation already. The first is when you were talking about air raid drills and basically the duck and cover drill went into my head, and a couple of things popped in my head. Was one the early 1996 level South Park where they had to duck and cover for lava popped up in my head, but also thinking about Terminator 2, which is Brittany's favorite movie, thinking about how terrifying that scene must have been for that entire generation when they're watching those bombs go off when Skynet and
the skin flaying off the
skin, right.
Well, that was there was a movie in the 80s or 70s called something about the bomb that traumatized kids in that era.
Yeah.
Because it was basically this is what will happen when a nuclear war commences, and it was on TV this is going to happen, and it traumatized a bunch of people.
Right, but then seeing that played out in front of you, I mean, we seem to have forgotten Terminator because there's a Chinese company called Skynet that's like basically monitoring cameras and stuff.
Have not we learned?
And
Well, you
no.
know how I feel about robots.
No, yes, I do know how you feel about robots.
So I'm not going to go there with that.
We don't have time for that.
Talk about Skynet and run the
But-
What episodes of your podcast can we look out for her opinions on
I think in
robots?
our opening, episode 0, when we talk about ourselves, I think I talk about robots.
I think you're
Hashtag
right.
robots, yes.
I don't trust them.
But the other one that pops in my head is thinking about that, like, as Hannah's talking about this basic education thing, and I'm sitting there, like, combing my mind, like, as sitting through health class, did we ever once talk about mental health and wellness? And I cannot remember. I'll tell you what I sure as shit remember, which is seeing slides of people's junk with STDs.
Yeah.
I see that. But why do we not have slides where we sit and talk about mental health is real, and this is what it looks like, and this is what you can expect. This is, what anxiety looks like. And also, this is something that I've had to have a conversation with clients a lot, and it blows their mind. Like, you sit there and go, like, anxiety is not a disorder, it is an emotion. Generalized anxiety disorder is a disorder where anxiety is present with you for most of the day in most situations for a period of a month or more, with a number of other symptoms present, such as stomach issues, tension, difficulty focusing, being on edge, these kinds of things that people don't think about. But having anxiety emotions in response to things that are fucking scary is not a disorder. It is part of the human experience. And I feel like when I say that to clients, I watch their eyes just get wide, like, whoa, like there's nothing wrong with me. Like, no, your body's doing what it's supposed to.
Yeah.
It is telling you there is a threat. There's a threat. Do something. It's an alarm system in your body saying, do something different, dummy. Like, it's not. It's
Well, like I mean, like I tell clients, I usually use their name, and I'm like, your brain is saying Hannah's in trouble. Hannah's in trouble. We need to save her. So then the processing, everything else stops because your brain is like, we got to protect her, and these are the things we do to protect her.
right.
And it's different for everyone based on a lot of times it's different-ish for different people based on how much trauma you've had. So, like, sometimes that means dissociation. Sometimes that means having a panic attack. Sometimes that means, like, there's all different things that can happen when our body is trying to take care of us.
And that can happen and not qualify for a disorder. It
Yes.
doesn't mean you've lost your shit. It doesn't mean that you're having a breakdown, at least not a permanent one. It could mean that you're having an understandable acute stress reaction to an intense stressor.
Yeah.
And that happens to even those of us that are healthy. I have caught myself being on edge. I have caught myself being more irritable. I just, like, my base temperature, just like everybody else's, is up. It's just up. And that's not a sign that I'm about to lose my mind or that I'm a danger to anybody or anything like that. It's just that this is really all stressful and my body is doing what it's supposed to do. And it's important for me to use what's become the biggest movement in psychology. 10 years ago when we were in school, it was diversity and understanding how different cultures play into things. And now it's moved on sort of more to the mindfulness and being able to be in tune with your body and being able to recognize and accept what's going on rather than always being in this state where you have to constantly fight everything. Recognize that sometimes your body is doing exactly what it's designed to do, and stop fighting against it and let it help you process what's going on so that you can store the information without the distressful stimuli, and then you can help you create a place for it in your mind where it connects to all the other information in your brain like RAM so that you can draw from it as you need to without it being so scary all the time. But if you can't sit in what's happening, you can't engage that process.
As an adult, I know how my brain is processing. I mean, as much as anyone can know. Like, I know how my brain is handling this trauma. But I can't imagine what children, because not everybody's. We are all in this together, but we're not all the same age. And if you're talking about prefrontal cortex development too, there are people on all ends of that spectrum. And so I wanted to touch on quickly, like, what do we think? What are the big things to look out for in younger people that are experiencing these stressors? What sort of I don't want to say what conditions will they develop, but like, what's a big red flag in terms of the a younger generation that is not as prepared to deal with this innately or is not as used to suffering these things. If this is their first, essential trauma or prolonged trauma, what comes out of that?
Well, I mean, I think kids are actually pretty adaptable, especially the younger they are. So I kind of wonder how much this will impact. I don't know. I wonder how many kids are just going to roll with this, and it might not have I guess my more worry is how it's going to impact like their social development. Also, like their school is different now. Like I mean, no, I like that's a big concern of the parents I work with, which is like they're not going to get the same education they would have gotten before. What's going to be the impact of that? They're not doing the same extracurriculars. They're not having the same social opportunities as before. And so I think that definitely is going to have an impact that I'm sure people are going to be studying longitudinally for like ever. And I think, but I do think it I think similar to with adults, I think it just exacerbates things that are already there. Like now you're isolating a lot more, whether you want to or not. And isolating is something, anyone can do at any age that's really bad for their mental health. I would say what parents can look out for more is just kind of, well, I guess my first always thing is if your kid is behaving badly, is usually how people think of it, parents think of it, being mindful of like, is this behavior coming from an emotional place versus just being like, my kid's being such a pain in the ass. Like they're so friggin' mouthy. They're trying to run away. They're like, acting up and acting out, and being more, and if that's upticking, being more mindful of like, are we just treating that as purely behavioral, which sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
Versus
based on their age.
Are we trying to like get to like the bottom of it with our kid and like create some space? And honestly, with parents too, it's more like being mindful as well of like, am I modeling behavior at home that is informing my kid of how to behave? So am I constantly stressed and on my last nerve with myself? Am I constantly complaining about what's going on badly in the world? Am I just on the news 24/7? Am I irritable? Am I snappy? Am I isolating? Am I going deeper into my phone? And so I think it's more like being mindful of actually how you're behaving and how that might be modeled from our kids. I work with families a lot, and it's so interesting how much we will notice what our kids are doing and then have no insight into if we're doing the exact same behavior. And then, because what I'll tell parents sometimes, and when I say it, I have to be ready for what might happen after I say it, because can be a very challenging thing for me to say, which is, are we asking the child in our home to behave better than all of the adults in our home?
Oh.
So watch it. It's kind of the energy when I say it.
Absolutely.
I try to say it very sweetly because it is a combative thing to say sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's like, are we being mindful of the way that we're modeling self-care and emotion with our kids? Or are we just being reactive, and then they're being reactive, and they're all being reactive, and all of a sudden our kid's the problem?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like what I've kind of noticed, not only with clients who have children, but also I have a lot of nieces and nephews. And some of the ages that it seems like it's a little bit trickier, like 5 and 6, I think that just really struggling, not wanting to do the same things that they always like to do, being isolating. Like one of my nephews kind of refused to do online school because it feels bad. And I had a client at the same time who was 7, and they were having the same experience. Like, it's like, I want to be there. Like, I don't want to do this. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
I don't get to do anything. And it was kind of having a negative reaction in some ways. So I guess what I wish about our younger people is that we stop being so worried about what's going to happen education-wise, and we just help them manage their mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because who gives a flying fuck about, they're not going to be caught up to all the other kids. All the other kids are going through the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
This is not going to be a fucking contest. I wish that push that parents have for their kid to do 10,000 things is like, let's just help them manage what it's like to be in the situation that they are currently in. I have a really close friend who's an art teacher, and she, I think, is going to end up having to do remote. And she was talking about she's redoing her whole lesson plan. She's like, we're going to have journaling, and we're going to do breathing activities, and we're going to, because she knows.
Good for
She's
her.
like,
Well, and
because
also she's an art teacher, so she has the
she has the creativity. She has the creativity and the ability to do that. There's no doubt about that. I absolutely agree. But at the same time, it's like, this is not trying to pretend and act like we have to keep on with the normal so that we can just keep on doing it is not gonna get us anywhere. And it makes it so that then we're more inflexible.
I mean, the big thing is like the term, like the idea of radical acceptance. And I think kind of speaking to what you're saying, Hannah, is like with the, I don't want to do school if it looks like this. Well, adults are doing the same freaking thing. If I don't want to go outside, if I have to go outside wearing a mask or like, yeah. And so I think helping our kids understand through modeling ourselves of we have to radically accept the situation we're in. If we can work towards that, can we then find some peace or some contentment or some just overall acceptance of what we're currently working with?
Yeah.
And and the limitations of that. And like that we're only going to get this far, and can we be okay with going that far? And also recognizing, which is a topic a thing I talk about a lot with parents is with the homeschool pieces, when you choose to homeschool a kid, the kid has to have a certain disposition. The parents have to have a certain disposition. There also has to be a certain level of self-discipline and intelligence too, like a certain kind of intelligence where you can do homeschooling successfully because people do it all the time. And right now we're just not able to discern that. It's just a sweep. So some kids are really going to struggle and maybe fail, you know, in the way that we define failing. And some kids are going to be fine because they would have been fine regardless. And some kids might actually thrive. I have much younger siblings, and my dad said they did great in online learning because they did it at their own pace. But they're also very smart, self-driven kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, who knew that if they did their whole week's worth of homework in 2 days, they could then play video games the other 5 days.
Right, they'll figure that out. I think for me, Brittany and Hannah have nailed it so well as they usually do because they're awesome clinicians. Is that what I've seen is I have the unique ability to see multiple generations in two different places. I work in one place where I see a very specific population, and then I work in private practice where I see a broad spectrum of it. And I am seeing that. So we've got 5 generations alive right now. 4 generations. We have the greatest generation. There's still some left, right? Then boomers, Xers, millennials, and our children, the alphas.
Gen Zs.
Oh, and
Or Zs and alphas, right?
Zoomers, as they're now
The
being called
Zoomers.
too. Oof.
But it seems
I like that.
Zoomers. Yep. I think the alphas are going to be the most interesting to study. Those are our children born from 2000, millennials children, 2011 on. Like Brittany is talking about, like seeing those, like the younger of them, I think aren't even going to like recognize, but how we treat them is going to be the fascinating part because we're going to remember. I have a 2-year-old right now, and I don't think she
knows what's happening.
She knows what she doesn't know. She's super smart. She's scary smart already, but
She said my name so easily today.
She sure did. I had her say hi, Hannah, and she said hi. She knows all her letters, her alphabet. She can pick them out from a matrix. She knows what letter stands for what. Well, sometimes she's working on that one, but she's pretty good. But the kid is smart, and I'm terrified because she's beautiful and smart. And
Yeah, it's a double whammy. You gotta worry.
Daddy's going to be polishing his gun when boys come over.
Benjamin,
We
that
have
is
talked about
misogyny.
this.
That is misogyny, Benjamin.
Do you see what I
We
did
have
there?
talked
Do you
about
see-
this.
Do you see how I lit that fire?
What, guns are legal in America?
That's also misogyny that you purposely try to push that on us to get our reaction out of it as feminists. So congratulations.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you know, he could be polishing his gun for his daughter's new girlfirriend, right?
I sure could.
Yeah.
Why don't you,
Equally,
if she's so
but-
smart, trust her?
I do trust her. I'm going to teach her well. I just want them to know that if they,
Yeah.
you know, they have to worry about her and me. Not they don't have to worry about me. They have to worry about both.
Yeah.
And then we're not even going to talk about Mama Bear.
I have a friend with a 4-year-old, and like she knows this as the sick time.
Right. This is
Because she remembers, you know, school. But when I think about it, like my earliest memories start at 4, maybe.
right.
Maybe. And then there's
Right.
1 or 2 from 5, 1 or 2 from 6, and that's it. So I think there may be kids who are a little immune. to what's going on right now, presuming it gets a little bit better. Although I don't immune is such a weird way of putting it that I just did, because I don't think that really ever goes away. I think that manifests in weird ways later, maybe, possibly.
I mean, maybe. Well, we got the boomers and the zoomers seem to be having the hardest time with this, because the zoomers, like, and the late millennials, like, Hannah, Brittany, and I are all zennials.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm firmly a millennial.
No, we're the first generation of millennials.
Oh, okay.
So we still remember, tape decks and that kind of stuff. Whereas,
Well, I remember tape decks.
I think we were about all the same age. Probably.
Yeah.
Eric's probably the same age as the rest of us.
But don't you think, Ben, it's like if your daughter fell over and you were like, oh my God, like, and then she'd freak out. I think it's kind of the same thing of, like, if we put a bunch of anxiety in our household, our kids feel that.
Oh, yeah.
And if we act as
right.
if it's okay and everything's fine, then they respond to our calmness.
Right, but what we're seeing is so much like the boomers and are having a harder time accepting a lot of this, and at least certain subsects, because they're aligning more towards, like, well, we've been through all this other stuff before, and we've been fine. We just did this. We just went to work, and we're fine.
Yeah.
And the Zennials are like, well, you're taking stuff away from me that I can't experience. Like this, when they went to spring break this year in Miami, and, like, we're all just like, what are you doing? And they're just like, like, oh, we can party, but it's spring break. Like, it's spring break. Like, coronavirus gives a flying shit what spring break is.
I mean, that's a whole...
It all goes back to egocentrism. Like, this is my good time.
Right, it is, but we're seeing more of it, more of the egocentrism in the Zs and more of the everything's fine in the boomers and the Xers.
So here, I mean, I really think America's going through about 3 pandemics right now.
Yep.
I mean,
at least.
there's coronavirus, systemic racism.
Yes.
Oh, I guess you could add capitalism too. And then also the rise of fascism. And these are all equal pandemics with their own.
So, and disinformation, so 5.
Yeah, well, like, so,
I guess that's fascism, but
so people giving up, and giving into misinformation and believing the lie, and a lot of what we talked about denial, and how they're processing it, is to allow somebody who really shouldn't have been present to begin with, to really take the reins and call some shots that he has really no business doing, really no business calling.
Oh my God, the Axios interview. Yes.
Oh God, I haven't. No, I won't watch it. I won't watch any more than that. I saw this.
You have to.
I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it because it won't make me. What's it going to do for me? Besides, tell me what I already know.
There's someone who edited
true.
it. There's someone who edited it so that he's interviewing himself, and that edit's pretty funny. Actually.
Okay, I'll watch that.
That one
That's
is glorious.
pretty good. That's pretty good.
I think the only other thing with kids is nightmares. I have a lot of kids who are having nightmares. And so I've been talking to them about kind of trying to see what the nightmare is about, and then doing, like, writing down things that they're worried about before they go to sleep or what. And usually what I kind of do, and this is a kind of a pretty simple question I feel like that parents can ask, is what are you worried about? What are you worried will happen? What is the biggest thing that you're worried about? What do you think is going to happen? And I've had several clients say that my mom and dad are going to get sick and they're going to die, and I'm going to get sick and I'm going to die.
Well, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not even preteens.
But I think that's such an easy thing to do at that age. Like, I have a lot of kids where they'll get a bad grade, and I'm like, "What's the big worry?" Yeah. And they go, "I'm not going to get a good job and have a family."
This
and
is going on my permanent record.
Yeah, and so it's so easy at that age to go all the distance with your anxiety. I mean, adults do it too, but I think younger kids, they're so concrete in their thinking.
Yeah, but also parents say shit like that to kids.
I mean, that is also true. But I don't think parents realize the kids take it to such a serious place.
Yeah,
like when kids say it in front of their parents, in my experience, the parents will look at them like, "Well, you know that's not true." And I go, "Well, let's break it down." But it doesn't surprise me that kids are going all the way to the most concrete, scary place with it.
Yeah, no, of course. But I just mean, if your kid has never had nightmares and they start having nightmares, checking in and talking to them about doing breathing exercises before going to sleep, listening to a sleep meditation, writing down how they're feeling, anything to kind of get some of those thoughts and feelings out. Because I think that's kind of the other problem right now, is feeling like you have to hold on to everything so tight.
Absolutely.
And also, I think we have so much information now. I think maybe being also checking in with your kids about what information they're exposing themselves to. I think we still operate, a lot of adults, under this understanding that unless we tell a kid what's going on, they just don't know. Because back in the day, you'd learn from a friend, and now you learn from the internet. And so I think too, checking in with your kids about checking in with your friends, with your kids about what are you watching, what are you listening to, like what's the information you're getting, and do you want to talk about that?
Can we do that with our parents too?
It's so funny that you say that, actually, because one of the other questions I was asking was, where did you hear that, or how did you hear that? And it's always like, I overheard my parents talking, or I overheard, like, kids are always listening.
Yeah.
They are always listening, and they're little sponges. And if you don't talk to them about it, they will create a narrative within themselves that has this very black and white aspect because of where they are developmentally. So again, like, you have to talk to your kids about just checking in and, like, how are you feeling? Like,
and ask open-ended questions. Don't say, like,
what
are you feeling really scared right now? Like, don't ask leading questions.
Oh, yeah.
Like, ask, like, hey, like, how you doing? Because they might be fine also.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's what's, like, when I'm talking about, like, adaptability and resilience with kids, like, there's probably a whole big group of kids who are rolling with this, like, and they're fine.
Yeah.
I think my little brothers are much that. And so it's also like, hey, like, how you doing? Hey, is there anything you've heard recently you want to talk about? Like, very open-ended questions. Don't put any emotional connotation on any of it unless they are noticeably very anxious. And then sometimes you can be like, I'm feeling really anxious because of this. How are you feeling?
Yeah. No, that's hard to do. That's hard to do. It's a skill. It's a skill to learn. It's like ask a question without being leading. So I want to kind of shift gears a little bit. So to a completely related, but ultimately separate topic. But if we're talking about kids listening and being always on, I'm again trying to think back to, like, when I was a kid, and it's like, well, so what did I hear my parents talking about, or what did I witness that I didn't really even realize that I was witnessing? And so my parents divorced when I was 10, and so there wasn't really a lot of conversations that I can remember between the two of them. But in fact, I always felt kind of pretty independent as a kid. My parents were good parents, but I was always sort of off and I alone or with friends playing video games, and it was very kind of I guess I feel like I really did sort of spend a lot of time alone as a kid, and so instead of parents talking about mental health, or instead of I'm trying to make a connection here to what I want to talk about next, but instead of parents, you guys know the hustle.
Yeah.
Instead of having my parents talk about their emotions, or having a wide variety of feelings that were being talked to me by friends or family, I had the adventures of Marty McFly.
Aww.
Or the adventures of Kyle Reese as he goes back in time to save the unborn child of Sarah Connor. These were I had movies, is what I'm trying to say. I had movies. And you guys have movies. You guys do podcasts about movies. So the big deal, and another, like, one of the main reasons I want to have you guys on is because I want to see, in addition to the just utter shitstorm that is our leadership at the moment, if you could call it that, is this feeling that I've had for a while now that perhaps we also aren't getting the best instruction from popular and mainstream media, and probably haven't been for a while. Like, if we were just talking about kids and their parents, and parents at home leading by example, and being a good example, and whether that's in terms of just talking about mental health or not, movies don't talk about mental health nearly enough. I'm trying to think the last movie that I saw that made me actively think about mental states, or just even just introduce me to one that was wholly different from my own. So the question I guess I have, and this is what I want to talk about in part 2 of this episode, is like, can we blame Hollywood for a wide stream? You're laughing. That's a good sign. Can we blame Hollywood for a wide stream lack of empathy, or a deficiency in some of these areas in terms of any of that? Like,
no.
Really?
Nope. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to go in on this for a second, and then I'm going to shift my gears away from it. But depends on how you're defining Hollywood. The FCC recently forced Fox News and MSNBC and CNN to reclassify their talking heads programs that are not news, that were represented as news programs on news channels, from news to news entertainment. They were forced by the FCC to reclassify because people were taking people's opinions as facts. So if you're basing that Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson and all these people are performers, regardless of whether or not you agree with their opinions, because I'm going to try to keep it unbiased as much as I can to get to the facts, because I have hyper-partisan opinions, which I'm going to try to keep out of it. But the reality is that ever since the fairness doctrine got scrapped by Ronald Reagan at the behest of Roger Ailes, who Roger Ailes then joined forces with Rupert Murdoch to form Fox News, which became a propaganda arm for the Republican Party, and now CNN and MSNBC and the others have done the same fucking thing and taken the Democratic ideals. And basically what's happening is, ever since that happened in the 80s, that we have been starting to get force-fed echo chamber stuff by performers. And fuck if V for Vendetta does not hit that right on the head with Louis Prothero. But, man, all of that, like this hyper-opinionated, angry people yelling and getting angry and providing selected facts to skew an argument, like lawyers, not like newscasters who used to have to provide a balanced view of everything going on television so that there wouldn't be this hyper-partisan shit, is that if you're classifying these performers as Hollywood, then yes.
That's a good point, Ben.
But you have to recognize what's happening here is that the problem is that with that, people are getting divided in such a hyper way. Like, we've all seen it on social media.
Oh, yeah.
That, people who used to be friends, God, I remember in college, God, I hated George Bush. You know, everybody's like, God, Bush, this idiot, or, Bush, good for Bush, but I hated that man. But now looking back on it, I'm I don't remember hating anybody that liked George Bush. I just meant you're whatever. Mm-hmm. But now it's the divide between us is growing to near antebellum period ways. People are getting angry and getting armed. Not everybody, but it is happening. And we're seeing this develop in a way that is scary, because people are getting so entrenched into their in-group, out-group, and getting so stuck in what their identity politics are, is that we're not looking at reasonablism anymore. And it's with the way social media works. I use Facebook a lot to interact with fans on Facebook or with our podcast here. And the things that I learned from the marketing on Facebook is you can target towards every single thing you ever put in there. When it was what books do you like? What movies do you like? We're going to connect with people because we're fucking morons. But all of that, you can't delete it now, which is fun. The things you learn about that is that basically it asks you, it reads you and starts advertising toward your opinions back towards you, so you're not exposed to the other side of things. You're not getting a balanced view anymore by anything. So you're only getting your views reinforced. So if you look at that as Hollywood, which I do because those are not newscasters, those are performers, I would say yes to your question. That yes, we can blame that because someone's getting rich off this shit. So it's not us.
Here's another way of looking at it then, because we all come from different schools. We have different parents. Mm-hmm. But we all have the same blockbuster tentpole release movies that we go and see.
I found my Blockbuster card recently when I was cleaning out my desk.
Oh my God!
Did you cry inside?
I should turn it into a necklace.
You really should.
Or a keychain
with a card. Oh yeah,
it is laminated.
Yeah, it is. They built those to last. That's why it's still around for you to admire it and cry over it. But no, so
pay a late fee.
But we are as a culture, we are consuming the same media, and I think that I don't know. Lately, I've been thinking that my media let me down. I'll tell you how this happened. It started with Star Wars, and I tell the story for Ben's benefit, but also for everybody else's. That I was asked recently by a friend of mine, Lauren, who has a really cool She-Ra podcast called Progressive of Power. Go check that out. She asked me whether I identified with Han Solo or Luke Skywalker. in Star Wars growing up. She's like, "Oh, was there, any leaning one way or the other?" And I said, "No, I don't know. Luke always seemed real whiny, and Han Solo was always a little bit more brash and bravado for me, and so I really didn't identify with either Luke Skywalker or Han Solo." And she replied, "Well, that's your privilege, actually." And I said, "Why?" She says, "Well, and talking about Princess Leia and having that be the only girl in the galaxy." And the fact that we got these two huge heroes, I hope I'm not misrepresenting the conversation, but what I took from it was that, representation in film was far from perfect. And and the socialization, girls versus boys, and how we grew up learning, and the types of role models that we saw, all the conversations we're able to have now as adults about whitewashing, about homogenous, I guess that's the right word, right? Like homogenous culture. Like this is all a problem because we weren't exposed to what you were just saying. We weren't really exposed to any more than one idea, and certainly not concurrently from other ideas. And so I do think there have to be, it can't just be a no. There have to be some kinds of negative side effects. I mean, if you guys are telling me it's no.
I guess my thing is this, I think, I appreciate your point you made, Ben, because I think what's happening, in my opinion, ironically and kind of horrifyingly, is news, quote unquote, news media is getting way less empathetic and more in-group, out-group, and way scarier, actually. And I think that's destroying people, kind of, their souls a little bit.
Yep.
I think more of like fiction or like movies and TV shows, because I know TV is becoming almost like it's sort of becoming even more respected than movies now.
Yeah.
I think those are actually becoming a lot more emotionally intelligent and empathetic and actually helping people because they're growing in varied intelligences. Mm-hmm. So I think I roll horribly as more Hollywood, like pop culture. That's what I'm looking for. That's the word.
Yeah,
pop culture is getting smarter and better and more self-aware and working harder to be more diverse and stuff like that.
The characters are more diverse.
News media is getting way worse, and so, which is it's horrible in that people respect pop culture less and respect what they think is news more. And so, and I guess maybe the thing I'm saying right now is don't watch the news, go watch the new Netflix show. I don't know. But I think
I would agree with that.
I think that's kind of what I'm seeing, because I feel like every other new thing I consume on like streaming platforms, in a movie theater, like I will go rush to Hannah and or Ben and be like, oh my God, this movie, like they talked about this and I don't know if I've ever seen something talk about this, and it was so smart how they did this versus that. Like we were talking off Michael beforehand, but like the new movie The Old Guard on Netflix.
So good.
What's so good about that movie? One, I think because it was directed by a woman of color who's only done romantic movies, so I think she had a emotional intelligence already coming in the door and a more of an understanding. Is that movie, for how much it's a shoot 'em up action movie that kind of like does a lot of things that other movies have done before, what's so different about it is there's so much vulnerability in that movie. There's neither of the female leads are sexualized at all, and it's Charlize Theron, who has been sexualized her whole career pretty much.
Oh, absolutely.
So like neither female leads are sexualized. The whole cast is pretty diverse. There's two male leads who are very quote unquote manly, but they're in a very long-term gay relationship. And they're very vocal about it, and it's very obvious throughout the movie. There's no hiding it, but there's also no like
shaming it,
fetishizing it.
Yeah.
And so that movie, and there's so much like physical touching, and by that I mean like so much like intimacy between the characters. Like they're all like badasses, but they're always hugging or like touching each other like on the neck. Or there's so much emotion. There's so much just like intimacy and vulnerability there, mixed in with all this like harder, cooler, John Wick-ish type things. And I think more often than not, which is why we sometimes talk about these movies on the podcast, our podcast, Popcorn Psychology, is because there is more emotional weight to things nowadays. And I think because movies are trying to be, and shows are trying to be more self-aware, sometimes the byproduct is they hit and miss too. Like we did Joker not too long ago, and for all it tries to, all the lofty things it's trying to do, it also does a lot of things wrong. Like there's a lot of movies.
Which we got. So we had somebody change a rating. Somebody liked our podcast and gave us a 5 and wrote a lengthy review, and then went back and changed it to a 4 because He was,
Well, okay, you didn't screw it up that badly then.
well, no, but he got upset because like we talked about it, analyzed, and then went hard at what it did wrong in the end.
Because I think because things are trying to be so quote unquote woke that they can actually misfire a bit.
Yep.
Because I think we're in a state right now where we're all learning, but because we're all learning new information, we're not going to get it right. And so so we're kind of in like a very young age still of being more aware of mental health, about how to actually demonstrate that in movies in a way that's both representative without being fetishizing, being open without being fake. And so I think I can't shut the fuck up about The Old Guard because I think it does it perfectly. But there's a lot of things like Sex Education is a show on Netflix that does it really perfectly.
Is that the one with Gillian Anderson?
Yes.
Yes.
And there's like a lot of newer shows that are doing a really good job that actually I think are being an outlet to kids and teenagers and their parents in a way that I would have never seen 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so cool to see that and how diverse and understanding and vulnerable everything is. Like, I feel like I've talked about this on our podcast, I think even on our last episode, is there's a much more also push that I've noticed with younger people about preferring like young men who are like, I keep using the word softer, which Ben pushes against.
Yes, I
but
do.
Softer boys who are more vulnerable and more like consent oriented and like things are being talked about in like also All the Boys I've Loved Before is like a perfect movie in terms of boundaries and emotional vulnerability and stuff like that. And so I think a lot of the younger media is really cool to see. So that's why I said no outright to you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because I think, like, I just can't stop picturing movies like John Wick where there's piles of bodies, piles and piles of bodies.
Here's the thing I think's different with that is I love John Wick. I love an action movie. I'll fuck up an action movie any day of the week. Hannah and I will watch all the John. Once you watch one, you have to watch two, and then you got to watch three.
Absolutely.
And then you got to watch Atomic Blonde, which is his sister movie, which is also badass.
Wait, it's a sister movie?
It's the same people, kind of,
Oh,
and like
okay.
the same stuff. It's like Charlize Theron's kind of like an '80s version of John Wick. Anyway,
Yeah.
But I think what I like about those movies, which I think feels less violent, even though they're crazy violent, is that there's talent there. Like even with the Marvel movies, like those fight scenes are choreographed and they're so interesting, and I'm impressed with like how they move and there's so much thought into it, and they're cool to watch. It's not just like I'm gonna line 8 people up and blow their brains out. Like John Wick is ducking and diving and using interesting movements with his body to combat his antagonist. It's not just like headshot as I walk through a room.
Also he's not ripped to shreds.
Oh,
Like Marvel movies, like all those guys, all of the characters are,
Unattainably jacked.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And in John Wick, he's not. Like, he's just, clearly he has a lot of different skills, but like at the same time, seeing somebody who can just do that, like, it feels different. It also feels like
There's a skill there.
that's what I'm coming to watch that movie for. I'm not coming to watch John Wick because I want to see if it demonstrates grief appropriately. Dude, like
That's actually why I watched the first one. I was like, I heard he loses his dog, and I was thinking, I really want to know what this is like.
so like I also feel like there is some weight to like there are some movies that's what they're made for in a different way, but I do think that I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. I think I go back and think about the old argument, which is, video games and violent movies make people angrier and meaner, which is just not true.
Nope.
People have been angry and mean, we've been violent since there were people.
Right, and the other thing is that people have had violent play forever. Children have violent play always. There's just spontaneous play. It has violence in it, and it has nothing to do with video games. People have also been able to differentiate between play and actuality forever, and those that have trouble with it, yes, there's an issue there, but
there's the chicken and the egg of it all.
Right.
Like, is the violent game what made you violent, or were you pulled towards and attracted to violent games because you were already attracted to violence.
Right, and study after study after study has shown that video games do not make people violent, even regardless of what people think or say, they do not.
So you can't put something in somebody to make them violent necessarily, but what I mean, do seeing stacks of bodies on a silver screen desensitize you to certain types of?
No.
I don't think so.
I think seeing it on the news, I think, would do more
Yeah.
to desensitize people than seeing it.
Because it breaks that barrier of like, oh, this isn't real.
'Cause
that
it's
you
like
have
your-
with movies.
So yeah,
Your
let
brain
me,
has to know it's fantasy.
I can help you guys maybe with a anecdote here. This is something that I got to experience as I got through an opportunity through work. I got an opportunity. I'm an avid gamer. I like video games a lot. I grew up playing Doom and Wolfenstein.
Oh, I love it.
Right? Like, just I could go with a double-barrel shotgun and blast through demons all day, or go and collect 100 Nazi scalps. I'm telling you, I could do all those things. But I have never once in my life thought that I was going to go and shoot a human being. But through work, I got the opportunity to do one of the police trainers, which is 8 foot, almost 360-degree screens in a dark room where the floor vibrates and stuff, and you go in with like real guns, but they have they're modified to be like the laser guns that you get to in the more advanced laser tag games now.
So this is like Men in Black when he gets trained in the.
Sort of. This is like the FBI introduced program, I think. But like you get these trainers, and they put you through real situations with actors. This shit is not video games; it is actors. And the one I went through. One where it was like a shoot or don't shoot scenario where you had a guy like waving a hammer at you, but he like eventually puts it down, and like you get to feel and see the difference of a real person threatening, even if it's on a screen. It's a real person, so your brain can differentiate here, between play and reality, and like even the pressure I felt for like shoot or don't shoot with that was a lot. But then the next one I got was a school shooting. And I don't even know if I told you two about this.
I don't think I've heard any of
Oh.
this.
This actually fucked me up for a little bit. Is like going through a clear and obvious shoot situation, but like it is a school shooting. You are going in. There are kids with guns, and you have to pull the trigger because they're fucking shooting you, and you got a little zapper on you that's going to zap the shit out of you when you get hit. And they put it right in your back pocket so you feel it right on your ass, which is really fun. Because I definitely got shot, and they zapped my ass.
Oh, wow.
Like, the thing that, though, like I had to realize was that, like, that affected me. Like, I went home and was reprocessing that. I was, like, stuck in the trauma. And every one of us therapists that went through that day went home and went the fuck to bed.
Yeah.
Like, in a way that we had never done before. Like, we went home drained, done, went to bed at 7 o'clock, got home, done. And then, like, the officer that had been, like, guiding us through that talked to us the next day, like, how'd you guys do last night? And, like, I was sitting there, like, replaying this because I took shots that they told me, like, the FBI guys didn't even take one of these shots, but the other shot I couldn't take was when a kid was, like, holding this other kid hostage. And I think what was going to happen is I was going to end real bad because one of the officers took a shot and like took that guy out that was arguing and was like holding the girl hostage, maybe to save us from what was going to happen if we didn't. But which I'm thankful for that he did that because he's a competition shooter and he made the shot. I don't think I could have.
But do you feel like that's It's because it's connected to like a real life situation?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was. Like I said, I played all sorts of games, Call of Duty, like all the iterations of it, pretty much, except the ones that suck.
How do you know before going in when they suck or not?
Sometimes I wait or rent them from Redbox.
Oh, there you go.
Except that I've also gotten the color copy of the disc before.
Sorry, that's a problem. That's why Redbox doesn't do games anymore.
Yeah, because people color copy the disc and put it in the like assholes. But lost my shit the first time that happened. But anyway. The differentiation between actors on a screen that I was interacting with having to shoot, which I knew was a simulation, and video games. Video games have never, ever in the history of ever produced that kind of reaction to me where it like put me into a somewhat traumatic state where I had to like stop, pause, and process that. So the difference that your body can perceive between video game and reality is true and exists, and I don't think that like anything simulated on the screen to be simulation where you're putting yourself in suspension of disbelief versus when you're putting yourself in, okay, I have to treat this like it's a reality. Like that differentiation in your mind changes so many things about perception.
Huh.
So
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think video games have anything to do with anything.
Or movies.
Or movies.
Yeah, because I think exactly what you're saying. Like, if you're not able to make that disconnect, it says a lot more about what's going on with you specifically. Like, if you're not able to, I mean, I guess we could talk about Joker again, even though I hate to do it.
Yeah,
because
I
hate
can't
talking
believe
about
you brought it up the first time.
Is in his case too? It's like
4,000
if you
listens.
can't
4,000.
shut up, if you can't differentiate between fantasy and reality, like there probably means that there's something mental health wise going on with you more than that. Either you are like have some sort of maybe like psychosis stuff going on, like. There has to be something going on with you if you can't differentiate between fantasy and reality. That's why, like you're saying, like Harry Potter, like people are in love with Harry Potter. There might be some people who think it might be real, but those people probably also have something else going on with them. Like, I used to consume a lot of vampire-based content as a teenager. You could still argue now. Now, shut up. I know that vampires aren't real, and so it's like. Our brains are able to separate that. I pray every night, but I don't think they're being answered. And so you have to. Honestly, here's what I'll say: is I think movies specifically do a worse job of normalizing behaviors, specifically romantically, that I have an issue with. Like 50 Shades of Grey is like the second thing we talk about, like the second episode we ever had of our podcast, because I think. What I get more concerned about, way more than violence, is normalization of relationship patterns that not just between romantic situations, but like parents, friends, like the way that some shows and movies will be like, if a guy treats you like that, then it's because he really loves you. Or if your parent treats you like that, that's just how parents are. Like continuing to normalize patterns of behavior that are very toxic and unsafe.
Hashtag Joker
gross.
and Harley Quinn.
But But okay, but so then I'm missing something very, I think, crucial right in between these two concepts. If violent movies don't make people violent, how is there anything that can be normalized out of watching a bad relationship on a screen? Because you still know it's fiction when you're watching it.
I think because there's a big jump between arguing with someone and shooting them in the head. Like, and in terms of violence, like I think sometimes violence within relationships can get normalized by movies.
Because this was my next question too. Is movies have other problems wrong with them about representation and diversity, and violence against women is huge, and all of that's getting normalized. I think all of that feels like it's.
Well, it's not getting like it's been.
So I'm glad you phrased the question that way, because it made me like think about the way we've even been programmed to respond about violence in games and things. Is that I think that the big violence, the things that are outlandish, that are horrific, that most human beings, reasonable people, can identify the difference between unreasonable behavior and what might be more closer to home and more realistic. And the arguments you see between people and the romantic relationships are things that happen every day.
Yeah.
They are things that happen in normal life to everyone all the time. So it's easier to identify with that and fantasize about that, because the way your fantasizing works is you can be fantasizing about putting yourself in that situation or wanting to recreate that or have that kind of thing, versus recognizing that something is so like far outlandish from the established norm that you're not going to connect to it. Like soldiers aren't shown videos of Call of Duty in order to acclimate them to when they're about to go to war. They're shown footage of actual war and like the traumatic injuries that happen because of it and the aftermath. They're shown actual footage of that to desensitize them to it. They're not given video games and VR and any of that shit. None of that. And like, I think the difference is because like you can get into such a suspension of disbelief versus getting into a fantasy of what you want or what you want to see and what feels accessible. And when that crosses and you get somebody who does go and like engages in a mass shooting or something like that, like the likelihood that there's other things wrong, like the Brittany and Hannah have been saying, is intense. And like is it a chicken or an egg, or is it that something else is in there that is causing that want to hurt someone, and then they're fantasizing about that, and then beginning to get to the point where they make it real. But the thing that I find most interesting is I don't recall hearing that a lot of people who have been in mass shooting situations have been known to be prolific gamers or anything like that, or prolific watchers of certain movies. And more importantly, I think to like illustrate the point and the difference here that I'm making is that how many people go to horror movie conferences and get signed pictures and memorabilia and love horror movies that are the most timid.
That's true.
Like people
like dorks, but like I mean that in a very beloved way.
Right. They're nerds like me. Like I mean, I don't go to horror movie cons because horror's not my genre, it's not my thing. But like how like having been to cons and seeing the people that cosplay as these things, like these are not people who are going home and fantastically murdering people.
Point taken. Point very much
like
taken.
they're not setting up kill rooms like Saw. Like that shit's not, it's not happening. But people who like watch these, so like it's the fantasticalness of it versus like seeing relationships where like, oh well, that's kind of how my dad treats my mom, so maybe that's how guys are supposed to act. Like we'd say like John Wayne is a good one to think about. Like look at the way like John Wayne acted in movies. Like the way he responded to women and the way
he kissed him.
Oh God, slapped him around,
shoving his face into their face.
Oh God, it's like
responded
oh, it's so gross. It's so gross.
He drags a woman through miles, arguably, in what's that movie?
5 Miles.
No,
Quiet Man.
My dad's fave.
Oh, yeah, Quiet Man.
By
of course.
like her freaking hair, kind of.
Yeah, my mom always had a problem with Sean Connery because he was always so much older than the Bond girls. She was like,
that hasn't stopped.
Ugh, yeah, exactly. And also, I feel like the consistency with which we see the romantic story and the way that they're told, and how, I mean, there's so many movies that show abuse and gaslighting and
yes,
Girl
violence
on the train.
or women who don't have a story or a plot behind them. They're just like this thing that's standing in front of you because they're beautiful to look at. And so I think also there's so many movies that show that. It's such a consistent thing that happens that I feel like it also starts to become like, if there's this many movies about this in some ways, then does it, and also because it's something that we can relate to that happens all the time.
It's
like
within social norms.
I think that's perhaps what my friend Lauren was talking about, was like, oh, if you don't identify with Princess Leia, you're SOL, because it's just like,
yeah, because you don't have another choice.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think what is getting better about that is like the Bechdel test exists, and that's a fairly new thing where if two women are in if a movie passes the Bechdel test, it's because there's two women who have first names who talk to each other about a topic that isn't a man.
See, that's such a low comically. I know that's the point,
But there's so many things that do not pass the Bechdel
I know.
test.
Well, the second Fantastic Beasts film does not pass it.
Oh, that's surprising.
And it's
because,
yeah.
now there's a new DuVernay test named after Ava DuVernay, which is if two people of color are in a movie and they both have a first name and they talk to each other, they don't talk about a white character.
Oh,
Yeah, right?
Oh man. Oh man.
I mean, there is quite a long way to go.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's better, but it's not fucking close. Like, there's a lot of things that need to change. And hopefully that's the way that's where we're heading in terms of representation and the differences that we will continue to see the reactions to Black Panther, because the entire cast is consisted of all people of color.
Right.
Like,
And mostly after African actors.
yeah. And the fact that when we see someone who looks like us, it changes things. It just changes things. There's just no other way to describe it. And the fact that has been, the fact that even we looked back at all the episodes that we've done, and we really haven't done that many movies that have people of color in them, because we're doing pop culture, because pop culture is mostly white movies.
right.
So we've really tried to kind of scale back and go back and try and find different things and different movies that are just as popular as some of the other ones, because to try to balance out our episodes better, so that we feel like we are
Not contributing.
And giving a better example of how you can be diverse. You just have to have the intent.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we just did an episode on The Wiz, which I hadn't watched since I was a kid, and I didn't appreciate it the same as I did now, like watching it and understanding all that it stood for and what it was and what it was most certainly not, and the way the story was The Wizard of Oz, but it was told so different in ways that made me see things. And like, I feel like we did, like, watching that was like an interesting experience for all three of us, and we really covered it well. But learning that the representation is so skewed and being even aware of it is so important to what we have to recognize. And part of that is part of the narrative that started our podcast, was seeing like people who are going like, yes, Luke would be fucked up. That's why we did The Last Jedi. Like, Luke was acting like a cranky ass old man who didn't want anything to do with anyone or anything because he has chronic PTSD from all he's been through. Like, it is obvious. And yes, no, they are not being social justice warriors by depicting that. And no, by using women as a main character, we're not being social justice warriors. Like, that is what it looks like when you put someone through extensive war trauma. I wrote an article about Luke Skywalker and his trauma, and it's in Adventures in Poor Taste. You can find it if you Google my name, Ben Stover, Luke Skywalker, you'll find it. But like, what we see in movies, to recognize that everything that's depicted in our show has been so focused on movies that are pop culture, but they're all so white.
Yeah.
They're so white.
And I think what bums me out, to get back to the relationship of it all too, is we're so quick to say, well, are violent movies causing violence? But then when we pick up a movie like 50 Shades and we're like, but that's really bad, like, we'll have comments that are like, it's just a book, like, or a movie, like, why you take it so seriously? And I'm like, because this shit is real though. Like, this shit is what happens in relationships that get normalized. And I wish that we would pick on that more than picking on violence in movies, because like we're saying, like, your brain's already separating those two for the most part.
I find that to be so fascinating because we're disregarding, like, people in the real world are actively disregarding the lives of other people when they go out without a mask, when they put themselves at risk, and all this other stuff. People are also, because of these the problems in relationships in movies that you're talking about, people are also normalizing lack of consent. They're not seeking consent in relationships, and that's a huge problem.
And assuming it's wanted.
Or assuming, like the victim blaming that I talked about earlier, of like, well, if a guy treats a girl like that, they must have done something leading up to that point that led to this behavior, because then if I can blame the victim, then I'm safe because I'm not doing those things. Or just like love looks like, I mean, we do so much mental gymnastics as people to like not confront things, which is also the mask discussion of like, this has to mean love, because if I acknowledge that this behavior is not love, it's actually violence towards me or hatred towards me, then I can't wrap my brain around that. It's too bad of a feeling. I have to shove it way deep down, because I have to make it conform to this narrative that I already have. I mean, it's the cognitive dissonance that we talked about too, and it's also just like old school patriarchy. Guys act like this, girls act like this, and that's, I mean, we're strictly talking heteronormative. Like, we're not even talking about like like LGBTQ relationships, and of just like, because I talk on a podcast about how like patriarchy hurts men, misogyny hurts men just as much as it hurts women, and that this idea that like, how many people think that 50 Shades of Grey and Twilight, which it's based on, are wildly romantic. So I think the biggest thing about, like, when I mentioned, I know vampires aren't real, but there are girls who think that people should behave like Edward, like that boy, if a man loves me, he might act like Edward in Twilight, which is like push and pull and kind of be a dick to me, and then like run away, but then come back and then be super controlling, because that's what love looks like. And I think like that to me is more worrying, the normalization of that, than the violence that's in Twilight.
Yes, I'm going to jump on that, because something that I see that blows my fucking mind, and so much so that the actor himself had to go on Ellen and like tell people like, fucking no, like, this guy's a creep, is You. The show You on Netflix.
Oh my God, yeah.
Like, so many people are like, oh my God, Joe's so hot, I want a guy to love me. Like, and he's like, What are you talking about? Like, he is a stalker. He is a stalker. He is a creep. Joel is a villain.
I will say this, though. This isn't a good thing to say. The mental gymnastics our brains do when we find someone hot is troubling. That is the
No
that's
doubt.
The
How did we-
thirst really fucks with our sense.
Yeah, it does.
How did we evolve that flaw?
I think that's so attached to our primal being.
It
I
is.
don't know if we can ever untangle that.
Yeah,
It's
agreed.
the same thing, like horny versus stress. Like, it's
You're on and the different
yeah.
hormones.
Imagine the levels of your brain turning on or not. Like, that's brain, going into brainstem of sex or no sex.
Yeah.
To kind of get close to wrapping up here and bringing the two topics sort of together, I want to talk just a little bit more about gaslighting and about the acknowledgement of. It just seems like we currently have a president who is changing reality, who is actively denying reality, and even things that we can widely no, he did say or were true or did happen. This constant gaslighting, constant lies and unacknowledgement of fact. And what this makes me think of, here's just an interesting question. I know I did a preamble there, but out of the blue, do you guys think movies are going to cover or be set during COVID times?
I have thought about. I think I've actually said that. I think maybe to Hannah.
Yeah,
is
for
every
sure.
movie and show moving forward that takes place in 2020? How are they going to acknowledge coronavirus? Or are
Interesting.
they going to just act like it's any other year?
Assuming we get this under control in 10 months, are all and there's plenty of backlog. There's still some backlog because
10
movies.
months?
I'm being the most optimistic I can right now at this point. And that's if a vaccine comes out, right? And they can somehow distribute it, mass distribute it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
Why did my soul just die?
I just, yep.
I mean, do you think it's a reasonable assessment, though?
Oh no, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's
probably.
just hard to hear.
Yeah,
Just hard,
Okay,
hard
yeah.
to hear
Well,
out loud.
sorry, guys.
No,
I
you're
felt the
fine.
room, the floor, literally. I don't know how.
Yeah,
that-
I felt that too. I also have to tell you, the minute when you said, started saying, I went on a preamble there, I was like, holy shit, dude, you're probably the first person in a while to remember that there is a preamble to anything, especially the president.
Well, thank you. I'll take it as a compliment. But the fact that do you think that because there's movies that didn't come out, right? Like Quiet Place 2, super awesome. The Bond film, we were just talking about that. But there's movies that didn't come out. Like they could realistically skip. You could just skip this moment in history and TV, and maybe the justification would be, oh, it's too close to it. And then the only time you get COVID movies or movies set during COVID times is 10, 15 years from now, when people look back and go, that's an area ripe for the plucking. Do you think that's going to happen? Because it would be gaslighting to do it, and it would be gaslighting to not do it. Because to not acknowledge the time that we're in, how can we collectively come together and process? But at the same time, who's going to watch a show about COVID or, even if COVID's solved, how is the media going to, and this is just an opportunity to prognosticate in your guys' expert opinions. How's media going to handle, and I'm talking about this time, not news media, but specifically entertainment media. What's going to happen?
I could see a lot of movies and TV shows just omitting it, just because how interesting can your plot be if no one's doing anything or going anywhere?
Well, there'd be Zoom
That
calls.
is a
It would
fair
be
point.
I think,
But who's going to want to watch
shows-
other people doing Zoom calls?
Well,
oh my
SNL's
God.
kind of doing a version of that. SNL, all their skits are Zoom based.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
I think there will be movies and TV shows who talk about it, but it's going to be what it's about. It's going to be a social issue movie,
Yeah.
or a thought experiment kind of movie. What happens to people because of this? Which Stephen King does a bunch of those kind of things.
Oh yeah.
But I would imagine a lot of media is going to skip over it just because it's not going to be that interesting in the day to day of it all. It's
Right.
going to be a barrier to a lot of plot that I don't know if people are going to be able to push through.
I think
So maybe they can.
I don't know it because another part of me is thinking about 9/11 and how I never thought that they would do movies that were so. I mean, there's a couple I just haven't seen because it's just like too much to watch. Remembering when it happened and remembering the moment. So I don't know, and maybe this is more about where we end up. Like maybe that will have a bigger effect on
That's
that.
a good point.
But I do think that I remember just being like, I can't believe they made a movie about this already. I can't breathe. I can't go see this movie. So I don't know. I feel like I think you're right in terms of the plot.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and I also feel like the movie will be a social experiment. But also maybe it will tell the stories of what it was like to be a mental health practitioner, or what it was like to be in the ICU, what it was like to be on the front lines,
We'll see.
And then, like, I think that
Like
those
Flight
are the
93.
kinds of movies, like those are probably the kinds of movies that we will see. But in terms of like a romantic comedy,
there will be though.
There will
Definitely
be.
going to
it's
be
like
like.
I'm
There
like,
totally
oh god,
will be.
it's gonna be like
It'll be a narrative
this,
device.
This like girl who's like, oh, but it's quarantine, and like he didn't even like Zoom with me. Like it'll just be so stupid and heinous. And but I think, I'm
Your ass
sure,
is gonna
and I'm
watch it,
sure
too.
it will get made.
But I don't want to see it though.
I don't want to see it either.
The reason why I don't watch 9/11 centric movies is because I was I was alive during 9/11. I don't need to see it on the screen. I lived it.
Yep.
From far away, but I lived it.
But
and
still.
so it's like I don't need to see something about coronavirus. I'm inside of it right now. Like I don't think I'll ever need to see a movie
So,
about coronavirus.
Yeah, I think
So to that point, you don't think it'll present new views that are foreign to you?
I don't know if I think I'm too exhausted right now. I think I'm
Oh, well, that's
fatigued
fine.
by it. Like I'm not, maybe in like 5 years, but like
I think
yeah,
it'll
we're
be
all on adrenal fatigue
once
right now.
once we're over it, I'm gonna want to be so far from it. I'm not gonna want to, and also because of the work we do, I'm not never talking about it.
Yeah, it's not, even when this is over, it's not over, man.
No.
Like so this is something where like the rest of my career will in some way be connected to this time.
Probably.
That's a heck of a thing.
Truly.
So I don't need to see Michael Bay do a blow him up version of like COVID-19, like the 19th.
Can I
don't
tell
know
you what I
you're
want to
talking
see?
about. What?
I want to see.
I'm gonna hate whatever you're gonna say.
What makes you say you're gonna hate?
If you say Batman, I'm
I
gonna
was
come
thinking the
over
same
there and I'm
fucking thing. I
gonna
was like, I
strangle
swear
you.
to
This
to
is
God.
our
death.
podcast, so I don't have to talk about Batman. But thank you for letting me.
You already talked about
brought up
Batman.
Joker and Batman.
You did that, not me.
It's the same
I
universe.
haven't brought up Batman once yet.
Okay, go
But
ahead.
Go ahead.
What I am about to say, I guess, ties to Batman because of who I'm thinking of. But I would
God.
love to see a Christopher Nolan movie.
Oh.
I would love to see him direct the Republican fantasy of what's happening right now, of that the Democrats are like creating COVID to control the economy to make sure that
Oh.
like killing millions of people to like get Trump out of office. And like I would love to see a Christopher Nolan version of that happening.
Of QAnon or...
Well, that's Wag the dog.
Oh.
Yeah, but like more in the direct, raw, emotionally fucked up way that he addresses things.
I'm good.
Well, I still don't know what Tenet is about.
I don't know, but I want to see it
I'm
real
dying
bad.
to find out, but I'm not dying enough to see it in the theater.
Oh,
Right.
That's right.
I think that there's like two directions that I want to take with this as an example. The first is we have a shit ton of World War II movies. Like,
Yeah.
I was thinking of World War II as well.
right.
Go ahead.
We have a shit ton, endless supply of those. Most of those did not come out right after World War II. Most of those are years after when we're glorifying it.
Right.
However, the one thing that we never see, we have never seen in a movie, at least not like a movie set about it. How many movies are there about the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Yeah. Because those are bummers.
Where, the U.S.
No, but I mean,
so
I-
badly wanted to win a war. Like, there's movies about like that happening and the Manhattan Experiment and that kind of stuff. But like, where's the movie about what that fucking did?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
that doesn't exist.
Didn't Clint Eastwood do the Letters from Iwo Jima, and there was one from the other side of the war? I think it was Letters from Iwo Jima.
Letters from Iwo Jima and like Pacific.
Yes.
They're like mirrors of each other.
Yeah, mirrors, and he did it from the opposite sides of the war. I thought that was really, really, really incredible. But America famously has an inability to look at anything that it did as anything other than righteous.
Right, like I see these shirts like using the Metallica font all the time of like of like World War winners or like
Oh God, nobody wins a world war. Who the
I
hell
know.
is putting that on a shirt?
I don't know, like, but like all the conflicts, like
Some
we've
asshole.
won, like those kinds of things. I see that, and I'm like,
Yeah.
like I understand where the warrior mentality comes from, but like, I mean, not all of those were like clear cut, man. But like thinking about that, like, so like I think that there'll be that side of it, but I also think that there's an aspect of cinema we haven't covered yet, which is that Rule 34 exists. Do you guys know Rule 34?
Is that the one that says if something exists, there's porn of it?
That's the one.
There you go.
Well, I knew that. I didn't know.
So you're saying there's World War II porn?
I'm certain.
Oh, 100%. There's
There's-
probably already
there's-
Corona porn.
There is already.
Oh God.
Like, I got quarantined with my neighbor accidentally.
Yes, that's already a thing.
Huh.
That's
here's-
already a thing.
Here's where I'll counter. World War II, there's action, there's patriotism, there's heroes, there's antagonists. Like, it's movie-esque.
Common story.
I
beats.
haven't seen a single fucking movie about the Spanish flu of 1918. Okay?
Nope.
Can you name one movie about the Spanish flu? Edward, I keep bringing back to Twilight.
For whom
Edward
the bell
died of
tolls.
the Spanish flu.
Oh, Edward died of the Spanish. There you go. So, and you know, Logan is actually present at Nagasaki. I think.
Yeah, they do
Logan
talk
and
about that in
Logan.
Wolverine.
Oh yeah, well in the Wolverine.
Oh, the Wolverine. Oh,
Yeah.
not Logan. Yeah.
No, that's the Wolverine.
But I
He's
would-
because
Yeah, the
he's in the
Yeah.
with the guy that becomes Silver Samurai. That's how he saves him.
I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we might have COVID movies because they make movies about everything nowadays. But I think there's no clear like winner loser, hero antagonist. There's no action in Corona. I mean, I think there's like the movie Outbreak, or Contagion, which already exists, which I think is the closest we have to like
Right.
an action version of what's going on right now. But that's even has like higher stakes in the sense of like it's a true global pandemic where like people are truly wiped out.
Is this not actually like kind of a giant zombie movie? Watching all of the people succumb to a disease of false information and like
All right.
getting wrapped up into that. See, I'm sorry, my brain. I
I
Hey,
just,
Ben.
did love the comparisons early on Twitter. I used to see a lot of tweets that was like, "Oh, this person's totally the kind of person that would get bitten but hide it, and totally go out and risk their own safety and
Yes.
others for it."
Yeah.
Like, yeah, because you're dealing with the same systems of selfishness, or let's just say, to use Brittany's term too, egocentrism rather, about how people handle severe crises.
right, but I didn't even mean that kind of zombie. I meant like look at like the metaphorical zombies of people who are buying into all this false information, like and,
Not thinking for themselves.
and not thinking for themselves and like becoming swarms, and they're growing and they spread their disease to other people using like the internet, because somehow we have the access to the most information in the most rapid way we have ever had as a species, and we believe the most bullshit that we have ever believed.
I mean, I think we're so caught up in like our current time period. I think like, I mean, back when all the misinformation about African Americans, you know what I mean? Like about
Yes.
gay people. Like, I think this is just another version of that. I don't think it's any worse. I don't think it's any better. I think it's just different because it's just kind of how we're wired as human beings. Like we have to put information into schemas in our brains, into little boxes to keep all the information we learn. We're raised with belief systems, with needs to have a belief system in group out group, like we've talked about. I think that it evolves. Hopefully, it's getting evolving it's going in something of a line of best fit upwards. And I don't think it's anything new, unfortunately. I think it's just different. I think it's more in our faces because we're all connected now. You only knew the vibe of your neighborhood or your small town back in the day. Now we know the vibe of everybody, but almost like we're missing the vibe of the small town or the actual local community. And so I think collectively it feels worse. Locally, is it better or worse? I don't know. I think we've kind of lost the sense of like locally how things are. But I think that sounds very pessimistic, what the point I'm making, but it actually makes me feel better sometimes. Like when I get caught up and anxious about how bonkers Trump is, I think about how bonkers so many presidents have been, so many leaders of free worlds have been when I actually go towards history. Like that one president who died from a cold because he wanted to show how strong he was by not
Harrison.
wearing a jacket in the rain. Like
Harrison.
we've elected idiots before.
Yeah, you're right.
Fortunately
that is
for them,
comforting. That is comforting.
yeah, like this isn't like I listen to a podcast called Can He Do That? And I've been listening to it like immediately. It literally got created like when Trump got elected.
Oh, can he do that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And basically every episode they pose a question. Can he do that? And they have, it's Washington Post, and they have like lawyers, historians, economists, and they will pose a question. Like this one past one was, can Trump actually ban TikTok? Because that's very, like they're always very like, what's going on this week. Sometimes they'll change a topic last minute because of what's going on, because everything's happening so fast.
You probably just heard my former guest, just Dave Jorgensen was on that podcast, I think.
Maybe. I don't remember names.
Guest. Yeah.
But I think that gives me comfort, because there'll be a lot of things where I'm like, oh, fuck, like he's the first president who's done this. We're going to be bombed and destroyed. And they'll be like, no, actually, Obama did something similar. Jimmy Carter did something similar. Bill Clinton did something similar. George Bush did something similar. Like, this is actually a very tried and true behavior of presidents. We're just so much more aware of things now, or we're just microscoping him so much because we're freaked out. But there are some episodes where they're like, this is wild. Like, no one's ever done this before. Or they'll say, this is wild and there's no way he can do it. He's just talking. And so I think that brings me into perspective of things feel wild right now. And are they actually any more wild than things have ever been when I really look backwards?
Yeah.
That doesn't make it better, obviously. But.
No. I think that there are general deadlines on the planet, like climate change. When you get to that kind of stuff, I think that there are probably some pretty clear signs for those who watch for them that we can't keep pulling this shit. I find comfort that there seems to be a lot of circular, stuff, and it's like, well, because what it tells me is if it was bad before and it's bad now, it could also get better because it was better before. Mm-hmm. So that's the good part. But
I tell people that all the time.
Oh yeah,
all the time. Very similar to that. So dead on there.
Yeah. So I find a lot of comfort in that sometimes too. But I think ultimately, my hope, as always, is for us to all just come together, realize that we're all suffering here, that there is something that it's not normal times, kind of like what you guys are all telling your patients too. That this is we're on trauma brain right now, and these it will even allow us to explain away it. And what this episode has done for me is allowed me to really, for the first time, I think, kind of get deeper into what people are thinking when they're not thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I try to tell myself and what I tell families I work with is everyone's doing something because they're trying to get a need met. People are really never doing something out of audacity,
malice.
Yeah. But sure, pure malice, pure fuck youism. Sometimes they are, but even in that context, they're probably trying to get a need met that comes from a deep emotional place that can be egocentric, but isn't it's almost like you can't take it personal, or you have to have some empathy for them actually, if you can find it. So it's easier said than done. I think of it more like in personal relationships, because when someone yells at you, or when your kid is yelling at you, they're trying to get a need met. They're just going about it in a way that's really inappropriate and is actually making people misunderstand them, and they're not getting their need met. But that's a way to think of something to help you have a little bit more empathy and also take things a little less personal.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Any final thoughts, you guys?
I feel like since we've talked about these two things, I'm going to throw a non sequitur in just because it's so it's in the ether apparently. But I just got an alert on my phone that Robert Pattinson tried and failed to lie to Christopher Nolan about his Batman audition.
Okay.
So, just
like that it exists, or
well, he would have been filming Tenet around that time with Christopher Nolan.
Oh, Pattinson's in Tenet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I somehow missed all of that information.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was just since we've talked about Twilight so much, and I frequently bring up Batman, to have that pop up. So either what's happening is the fucking technology gods are listening, goddammit, or there's so much ever presence of media that this discussion today was totally warranted, and the impact and presence of it is so profound that we study the behaviors of even the people who portray it.
No, it's because the FBI agent who watches your phone personally is like, I know this guy likes Batman.
I know, that's right.
Let's give him Batman news.
I hear that. I feel like that's actually way more likely.
I feel like for my phone, it's probably NSA. So it's it's got to be a higher level.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Sure, Ben. Yeah, I think it's been really nice to be able to even just talk to other therapists. I mean, this has been because of the prolonged trauma of this. We are also in a state that is different, and also going through this with our clients, and how managing that is a whole other set of anything. So I feel like
be nice to your therapist.
yeah, I feel like it's
Bring your
Right.
therapist an apple once telehealth is
We
over.
don't know either.
yeah. So anyway, so it's just been nice to be able to talk and to have and Eric to have some really thoughtful questions. I feel like we've been really helpful.
I appreciate that. I think, too, that this episode taught me just how much like real people therapists are.
Yeah, we are, believe it or not.
Real
Indeed.
whole people. I
Real
really...
whole people.
Real whole people. I really want to thank you guys for coming on.
Well, thank you.
And before we go, where can people find you, either personally or if you have social media accounts you want to plug, now's the time.
Well, you can find us everywhere. I have my voice on now. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Popcorn Psychology. We're on Twitter at popcorn_psych. And you can always email us at popcornpsychology@gmail.com. That's the best place to contact us if you have any in-depth questions about therapy, mental health, if you want our reflections on something, or if you want to suggest a movie to us. We're always taking requests, and it's always interesting what gets requested the most versus other things we assume will be requested the most. And you can find us on any platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, I think Play, like
Everywhere.
any platform I think we're on.
And we just got on the one that the new one that popped up that is specific to India. So,
Oh, well, damn.
Ooh.
woo,
I gotta get this podcast on there.
yeah, you sure
You
do.
let me know. Oh, have you guys done Memento?
No,
It is
we
on
have
our
not.
request list.
It is
That's
on the- it's
what
on-
a Jonathan Nolan film, right?
No, it's Christopher.
That's Christopher
Chris.
Nolan.
Really? What was the Jonathan Nolan film that I saw?
He does Westworld.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, okay. So Memento would be a cool one. I was thinking about that. I did Memento for Halloween one year. That was super cool.
Oh, that's a good costume idea.
Yeah, it is.
That's real cool. I had the suit. I had the tan suit.
Oh, wow.
So he's got a blue button down. I dyed my hair bright blonde. It was actually the first time I dyed my hair blonde ever.
Did you like draw in with a marker like the perfect butt
Sharpie.
chin?
Yeah. I had to watch. I had to look in the mirror and draw like whatever he writes for himself.
Oh, yeah.
across his chest and all that.
I meant
that's
like
so
the
cool.
perfect chin that Guy Pearce has.
No one else has that chin. Nobody can. Why would I strive for the unattainable?
Because you're an American citizen. I don't know.
Oh yeah. Oh, zing. But
And the media showed you something. I don't know.
Yeah. No, this makes me feel a lot better about consuming media, especially even violent media. It's like, no, this isn't radicalizing people. This is people have an innate way to tell the difference. If they don't, they have other issues. And I don't know. I feel a lot better about. I think that's part of the question of coping with this too. Is assessing the damage, right? It's like, so if this thing is happening, how messed up am I from external factors? Like really just taking my own temperature, as it were. And so you guys have helped me kind of talk through what all that feels like.
I'm glad.
So thank you, hosts of Popcorn Psych, for spieling, and thank you, listener, for listening. And more episodes coming, I guess, in a little bit. This was just an exciting twofer that we did at the beginning of the month, and I think it's going to last probably the rest of the month. So, just real quick, I have not yet plugged the social medias for this show, so I will say it's TYF Spiels, at TYF Spiels on Twitter, as well as thank you for spieling at gmail.com. And would you know, I have some rate and reviews on iTunes I want to thank people for. I didn't ask for them, but now I'm going to ask for them. So please go rate and review this show on iTunes directory. Thank you to everyone who's already done the reviews. And there's 12 5-star ratings and a 3-star. And all of them are reviews except for the 3-star, and I don't know why. So please.
That's what they always do.
I'd like to help you out, Mr. or Mrs. 3-star. But just let me know. Shoot me an email. And listeners, if you're just joining the show, I've talked from everything about the new video game, Last of Us 2, to...
So good.
I'm so glad you just finished it, because we're going to talk after this. To all sorts of topics, including today's. So thank you so very much, and I'll talk to you later.